And we're streaming live onto YouTube. I'm waiting for the sound to jump in on the other side there. Welcome, guys, to Amplify Your Impact. Give me 1 second, then we'll do the appropriate intro here. Great. Okay. Look, the bottom line is very few entrepreneurs that are out there voice the truth about just how often they find themselves living like on that line between positive hustle and complete implosion, as I would call it. Even less speak about the lengths that they're willing to go to really cope with that sort of constant state of overwhelm that you can find yourself in, and what it takes to survive when a real curveball is actually thrown at you. With that being said, welcome to Amplify Your Impact. This is a show for entrepreneurs out to change the world with their purpose-driven businesses while increasing their personal wealth and balancing their personal health along the way. Here's the show's warning, though, to get us started. Real life entrepreneurship is raw, and so is this show. We are recording, as you see right now, live. It is unedited and unfiltered in any way, shape, or form. So activate your Mula Bandha and let's go. Little yoga cliche in there. As you guys know, I'm Josh Biro. Today's guest is someone that you absolutely need to know, this person. She's a yoga business owner turned TikTok creator with over 35,000 followers. She's successfully run her own yoga studio, filmed 3 seasons of a yoga TV show, and even pivoted to become a small business focused content creator. She's also launched a podcast, Adulting 101, which has more than 200 episodes, most of which I have not listened to yet, but all of which I have listened to were amazing. You have to go check it out. And she uses her own platform really to sort of educate small business owners on the ins and outs of running businesses, from really practical stuff, taxes, marketing, avoiding burnout, but really taking care of your sort of physical, mental, emotional well-being as well. So with that being said, I'm very pleased to introduce everyone here and welcome Miss Danielle Ryan. Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to have this conversation. I think that a lot of the stuff we see online when it comes to the entrepreneurship space can be pretty sugar-coated. So I'm ready to get right into it. Let's go.
Ready to get right into it. I love the grit in the attitude. I agree. The sugarcoating is a thing of the past. Really, we all know that there's more going on than what people project in the perfect world of things. So that's where we want to take some of the conversation. I'd like to start us out with just an anchor question because it's called Amplify Your Impact. In your own words, if you had to describe what your impact is in the world, in what you're doing before, during, now, where you're going, what is that? What's the impact that you're trying to create?
For sure. I always consider that I'm leading my life, my business, everything that I do by this example that life can be fun if we let it, and business can be fun if we let it. Obviously, we all go through challenges, we all go through hardships, but if at the end of the day, we can kind of really stop and think about what that vision is that we want to create for our lives, and then live authentically as we can in pursuit of that vision. And I like to think of myself sort of as someone that really does that in their day to day. And I get the feedback that says, you know what, Danielle, you've inspired me to do X, Y, and Z. And so I think my impact is really just giving people permission through my own actions that it's okay to show up as you are and do whatever the heck it is you want. Even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else, that's okay. It's your life. So let's own it.
Let's own it. Fuck yes, my friend. I love that. I have to, before I get to our next question, note, like, are you in, I don't know, my video is doing something weird, but are you in, I'm taking a guess here, like downtown Vancouver near Falls Harbor? Yes. I noticed the trees in the background, that area. I know the area well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Before we get into a little bit more of your backstories, I think people really want to hear it. We pull a random question from the hat. The one that we got today is, what do you do as an entrepreneur when you get really angry? Like something's just pissed you right off. How do you react? Do you have a technique? What's your thing?
For sure. So like Danielle of 10 years ago would absolutely lose her mind. So whatever it is, angry emails, yelling, screaming, whatever, any of that. I like to think that I've like calmed down a bit in my elder age. I'm actually not that old, but I think that with life comes maturity. And if I find myself really angry, a lot of the times I'll just take that step back and really think about, okay, why is this triggering me so heavily? And what's going on here? what's sort of the solution? And rather than act immediately, I always allow myself just that time to pause and take a deep breath. And I don't know if that's like the yogi in me, once I kind of, started practicing yoga and really living that sort of lifestyle. The need to sort of react all the time just kind of fizzled out of my life. And so that's not to say that there isn't going to be times where I'm mad and I just go right for it. But I think for the most part now, there's sort of this moment of self-reflection where I'm kind of just like, okay, what's going on and what can I actually do here? What's in my control and what's not? And so, sort of just try to address the situation as not necessarily calmly, but as realistically as possible, I suppose.
As realistically as possible. Tell me a little bit more about this inner dialogue though, because I'm always fascinated by the idea that, like, I talk to myself in my head and I ask my wife about this and she does not do that. So like, clearly this is not an everyone thing. So when you're like, I pause and I am kind of introspective, I'm paraphrasing obviously what you've said. Are you talking to yourself or is it just creating the space? Like, what's actually happening in that moment?
Okay, it's actually so funny you're asking this because I was listening to a podcast last week where they were talking about this, how some people think in like images and then other people think in like sort of this dialogue. And I think in the dialogue. So again, I just assumed everyone thought like I did,
Right.
But it's not a thing. And I'm like, how do you like process what's going on if you're not thinking in words and playing it out in your head? Like, to me, that just seems so foreign, but essentially it's exactly that. It's like as if there's two Danielles living in my head and they're just having a conversation with each other about, okay, what do you think about this? No, I think this. And it's sort of just, it's incessant at times, but in those circumstances, I think it's definitely quite helpful for me to be like, okay, let's come back to reality and kind of figure out how we're going to deal with this.
Bring a little like rational into the emotional is what I'm hearing you say.
Exactly. Yeah. We talk about, I also do a little bit of addiction counseling in my spare time with the a million other things that I do. And we talk a lot about the concept of the wise mind. So it's about bringing together your emotional mind and your logical mind, and then finding that place of rationality between the two. Because if you let one or the other sort of steer the ship, you're going to end up probably in a situation that's not exactly ideal. So finding that sort of rational piece is really important in any decision in life.
Heck yeah. A little bit more down the rabbit hole, because we're already in it. Like, I find personally, and I know a friend of mine and I were having this discussion too, that sometimes though, when I do that, like I'm looking and I'm questioning myself, like, why am I upset about this? And what does this matter to me? And et cetera, et cetera. I also, that starts to spiral further. Like I get too rational and I'm overthinking it. Do you find that happens for you too? I guess is I don't know what I'm asking here, but
yeah. It's funny. I had this like conversation actually when I was in therapy once, where we're talking about, I don't know, situation A. And then next thing you know, I'm like, okay, well, this happened 4 years ago, and then this happened, and this happened. And then I'm like, okay, I was just looking for the answer to this one problem. And now all of a sudden I'm talking about, childhood things that happened 20 years ago. And it's like, how is any of this relevant? And I think to sort of go off what you're saying, when I am in a situation that is particularly triggering or makes me angry, I think that I can often end up in sort of a similar situation as that therapy experience where I'm like, oh, well, last time this happened. And then the time before that, this went down and and I'm trying to like tie together all these pieces that maybe don't necessarily go together. But I think within our heads, we're just trying to justify everything that's happening. So it's like, if we can connect the dots, then it all makes sense. But I think some things in life just aren't meant to make sense. So
yeah.
they
or
just
whatever,
are.
like our emotional reaction is our emotional reaction. It's okay. It's just a
exactly.
thing. Yeah. I always think like you end up giving you have like the straw man argument against yourself.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, let me get us a little bit on a little more linear track just for a second here. For those of you who don't know Danielle, and for Danielle, for the people who don't know you, what's your origin story? I like to call it, like, what's your superhero origin story? How did you get to being here on this podcast? Not specifically, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. So in, I guess it was 2016, I landed sort of like my first big girl job. I was working for a municipality. I had pension benefits, union mandated raise. Everything was great on the outside. And I liked it for the first maybe 6 months. And then I kind of found myself in this place where I would, see a job opening, want to apply. The way the union was structured, it prevented me from being able to do so. And a lot of just like bureaucracy. And so with that, all of these rejections, I was kind of finding myself like, is this even really what I want to be doing? I found myself driving to work every day. I had about a 30-minute commute each way. And I would just spend the entire time thinking like, am I going to be able to do this for the next 30 years, realistically? Again, with this inner dialogue, like, Danielle, what are you doing? Is this actually what you want to be doing? And I kind of there was nothing like, a lot of the times we hear in people's origin story, this like breaking moment or turning point where they just knew everything needed to change. And I never really had that. It was just the mundane routine of doing the same thing in and out every day, sitting on my computer, pretending I was working because I could get all my work done in one day, but I was being paid to be there 5 days a week. And it's like, I can only open and close this Excel spreadsheet so many times before I want to like hit my head off the wall. And so I started to get into learning about running a blog. And that's when my podcast came out. And I just wanted sort of this creative outlet where I could share with people the experience of navigating the world of adulthood. So I started the blog, I started the podcast, I started reading. On every lunch break. I would just go down to the lake, read a book, listen to a podcast. I'm really trying to use every spare minute that I had to sort of improve myself and figure out like where I was going to go from here. And so fast forward to 2018, it was my 26th birthday. I was sitting on a bus we went on like a brewery tour to celebrate. And I looked at my partner at the time and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I'm going to book a trip to Portugal and I'm going to become a yoga teacher and that's going to be it. So essentially, I maybe had a little bit of liquid courage, if I'm being honest at that point, but I think deep down, I knew what I wanted. And so I did it right from my phone. I booked my flights, booked my training. And then the following Monday, I went into work. I gave them a month's notice because I'm not an ass. And I was like, okay, come June 1st, I'm leaving and I'm starting my own business. And everyone was like, okay, good luck. Have fun with that. See you later. So yeah, from there, it just kind of, I went and I bought 10 yoga mats, 10 blocks, packed them into the trunk of my Kia Forte, built a website and was like, I'm offering a mobile yoga service. I didn't have a studio at the time or anything like that. It was just, and I had no experience as an entrepreneur. I was just kind of like, let's see where this goes. So I did that for almost 4 years. And in 2020, pre-pandemic, my partner and I had bought a house. So we converted part of the house into a yoga studio. So I started doing private classes in my own space, as well as continuing with the mobile service. And then again, after, I guess, 2021, restrictions started lifting in Ontario, which is where I was from at the time. And I was going crazy. I was teaching like 6 to 7 yoga classes a day. And the region that I was in was like geographically quite large. So I was driving from location to location. So spending hours a day in my car, hours a day teaching yoga. And I really just burned myself out and reached this point where I was like, this isn't even fun anymore. Why am I doing this? And while all of this is going on, I'm also slowly growing this following on TikTok. So I had started documenting, how to start a business in Canada. These are the steps that I followed. These are the things you need to know. And that started to really gain a lot of traction simultaneously as I'm going through this period where I'm burning myself out. And so I essentially decided at some point that the yoga business just wasn't aligned with where I was at that time. And so in April of this year, I had decided in the fall of last year, but in April of this year, I actually relocated to downtown Vancouver and decided to let that yoga business go. So now I'm really just focusing more on the sort of style of content I've been creating on TikTok and working on getting one-on-one consulting clients and really just teaching other people how to start and run their own small businesses. Hopefully in a way that they can avoid burnout like I did, because it was awful. That was a really hard time in my life for sure. And Heck so yeah. That ends my TED Talk here on where I came from.
I want to just let you keep going. I love it. I would listen to you talk about this all day, because the reason I would listen to you talk about this all day is it's very relatable. It's your unique journey and your unique story. But to go back for a second, you had made the comment that you didn't have this like major impetus moment. It was like this small accumulation of dissatisfaction that then Liquid Courage gets involved, and we're on our phone booking a flight to Portugal, which I love because I'm impulsive in that way too. But
Yeah.
I think that that's the entrepreneurial conversation that doesn't happen enough, that people think there needs to be this huge like call to action, because like that's the Hollywood storyline, that like there's going to be this thing that forces you to really take the action. And actually it's just you that has to take the action. So, but backing us up. So we're 2018, you're in a brewery tour, Kia Forte, ripping around. Is it Muskoka? Is that where it is yours? Yeah. For those of you who are not Canadian, Muskoka is, yes, possibly the best word for an area in Canada. And we have many more that are like that. In any case, and the Kia Forte, I can actually like envision you.
Exactly. Beep, beep, let's go.
Let's do some yoga. But like that moment of the decision to then be like, I'm going to be a yoga teacher. The question I have is around money, because in entrepreneurship, the thing that especially heart-centered entrepreneurs maybe forget to talk to themselves about, but especially on other people, is like the financial part of it. Obviously, it costs a lot to go to Portugal and to do a training and to, I don't know if you bought it or already had it, but at the very least, like maintain a Kia Forte when you're driving all over the place, buy the mats, acquire the clients, et cetera, et cetera. Was it just like not a thought? Did you like sit down and be like, here's my business plan for how I'm going to do yoga? Okay. Or what happened with that?
I always leave this part out mostly because I forget, but prior to me deciding that I was going to quit my job, I had actually entered this contest. So the town that I lived in was like a very small town. And they had this opportunity where people could pitch their business idea, and then the winner would get a year of free rent in a space downtown. And so I had to create a business plan for a yoga studio for that contest. So I had gotten into like the top 3 finalists, and then we had to do this big like panel presentation, PowerPoint situation. And I unfortunately wasn't selected, but it was that sort of process of working through, okay, like what are the actual logistics side of this business that I would need to figure out. And then that was what inspired me to be like, you know what, fuck this. Like, I don't need a physical space. I can just bring the yoga to the people. So that was kind of the first step in me kind of figuring out, like, is this going to be viable in the long term?
Yeah, I love that. So then from a like financial calculation side, you know, beyond like profit and loss or whatever else, I'm always curious about, because I remember for myself having this thought when I was building our last yoga studio, my wife and I had inherited some money because my mom died. And it wasn't very much money, but at the time for me, it felt like a lot because I just had never had so much at one moment in time. Mm-hmm. It was way short of what we needed to open the studio. So like, I remember literally going through the couch cushions and like, you know, the center console in your car and like collecting the change and putting it in a jar, thinking that's how I would accumulate enough to open a friggin' yoga studio.
I love that.
That is not the technique.
The blind optimism.
Yeah, but that's my point. Like, I remember thinking, okay, if we just teach all the classes and we practically live in the back of the studio and we're like saving people's lives and we get to do yoga every day, like that's good enough. We don't need that much money. I'm like, if we clear a couple grand a month or something like that would be great. In hindsight, that was a really stupid thought actually for how to approach it from a business standpoint. And that's not what happened. I mean, we went way bigger than that. But so at this moment, when you're like, you've got some business plan or whatever, is that the thought? Like, I'll bring yoga to the people, is just, if I can etch out a living that I like, I'm checking the box? Or did you have these like vision of a more grandiose yoga situation?
Not really. Like initially, I think I had a good enough cushion from my 9 to 5 to cover my initial expenses. So like my training and my supplies and everything I was going to need to get started. And essentially my goal, so I actually went and got a like part-time job. I quit my 9 to 5, got a part-time job as a waitress where I would work like 2 to 3 nights a week just so I could make enough money to cover my bills while I was building the business, because I was like, but that was a seasonal job. So where Muskoka, for those that aren't familiar, is like cottage country. People are there for 6 months of the year. And then in the winter, it's completely dead. So the place I was working would close in October. So I knew in my head, like I have this deadline where by October I need to be making enough money to float myself. Otherwise, I'm going to be back on Indeed looking for another 9 to 5 job. Like this is the like do or die, sink or swim period. And so I think at that point in time, my goal was to just continue to make enough money so that I wouldn't have to go find another 9 to 5 job. And so it didn't matter if I was making, you know, $200,000. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to just make enough money to keep the business viable. And so that's exactly what I did.
Yeah. So then I want to move on from this a little bit, but I mean, I guess the question would be now, two questions. Now that you know what you know and you've had your experience, if you were to like go back to that version of yourself at that moment, would you tell that version of you to do it any differently?
So I think in my case, maybe I would say, you know what, like, fuck it, just do it. Just because I know for me, like, I'm the kind of person that like, I'm going to figure it out. Even if I have to go get a job at McDonald's so that I can cover my rent, if I want to make this dream happen, it's going to happen. But anytime, and I say this a lot on TikTok, is like, I do not recommend anyone does what I did. So if you're listening to this podcast, do not take my advice to be like, go and quit your job. Fuck it. I think you need to have a solid plan. Like when I quit my job, as impulsive as it might have been, it was also quite calculated. And I knew that I would have a strategy to figure my way out of it. So if you're not the type of person who has that ability to kind of think quickly on your feet or sort of figure stuff out, I wouldn't recommend that you just quit your job and decide to start a business, because it's hard and it takes a lot of work and a lot of grit and a lot of focus and intention. And if you don't know what you're doing, you could end up in a really hairy situation pretty quickly, I think. So I think that even in the 4 years that I've been an entrepreneur, the space has evolved so drastically that it's possible for you to do both simultaneously, sort of like start to build the business while you're working and then transition your way into it. I've seen lots of friends in the entrepreneur space since me follow in that footstep. But I don't necessarily think that everyone should just quit their job and start a business.
Right. I mean, I love that. What's fascinating to me is, you know, some of my backstory would have been similar, where it was like blind faith that we're going to make it. But I was like, if it doesn't, it'll be okay. Like I've got so many other avenues to create safety for myself. You know, if you didn't have that though, I guess the point would be part of the blind optimism advantage is like, you just do what's required to win, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
On the other hand, I also agree, like right now, today, you can definitely run multiple things simultaneously. Like it's actually a lot easier because it can be so much more online and there's a lot of cheaper resources available to get you started and stuff. So, okay. The second question around this too is, at that point, did you have any idea that you were going to become a TikTok star talking about small business to people?
Absolutely not. I thought that the yoga trajectory was the path I was on. I was like working on, I did my 500 hour, or I got to my 500 hour this time last year, I guess. And my goal was to, you know, start building curriculums, teaching concurrent education classes to yoga teachers and really moving in that direction. And the whole TikTok thing just kind of happened totally by accident. I started just, again, documenting the behind the scenes of what it was like to run a business and how step by step, how to start a business, just because that information, especially in Canada, is really difficult to find. And like nobody wants to read the CRA's website. So if you could watch a 15-minute or 15-second video that's going to explain it to you, it's definitely favorable. So I think that like any of the most wonderful things in life, it kind of just happened by accident. And I decided to, you know, hop on the wave and see where it took me. So here we are, no regrets.
Follow it, no regrets. I love it. Okay, so then what was like, I understand the moment where you're like, you know, this journey that I'm on with yoga is, I'm maybe done that journey. And my side comment for your story up until this point is, I really kind of believe personally that opening a small business in a place like Canada, especially a service-based business like yoga, but any service, is the worst way to make a bunch of money fast. But it's simultaneously the best way for you to acquire all of the necessary skills to then do the next thing that who knows what it'll be that would be helpful for you to build personal wealth really quickly.
Exactly.
So
You're 100% correct. Like when you, especially something like yoga, when you're offering a service, especially a custom catered to you service, you are working, like hustling for that money, like just to get enough to like figure out or to meet whatever that income goal is. But like realistically, I don't think you're ever going to make, unless you have multiple teachers working for you and da 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 da, like there are certain restrictions on physically how many classes you can teach in a day, in a week, in a month that are going to yield a certain amount of income, right? So unless you can figure out those other streams and all of that, it's work. And it, like you said, it lays the foundation for whatever the next thing is. So even if I had of, decided to stay with yoga, I think I would have had the foundational tools I needed to build those online resources for like the education piece, concurrent education, whatever that looked like. But this was just kind of the first step in the entrepreneur journey. And who knows where I'm going to be 5 years, 10 years from now, right?
Totally. Yeah, to sort of echo a little bit what you're saying, I think your business model has to shift. Like it doesn't mean you have to leave the vertical that you're in necessarily, but if you really want to grow to a certain place, you have to change the paradigm. I'm a proponent as well that like in any business, if you're hitting a ceiling, it's possible that's because of like, catchphrases that people use, market saturation, or there's just, you can't hire the right people or whatever. Like, I suppose that's possible, but that seems far less likely than the way that you're doing business isn't scalable. Because to your point, like how many trips around, X kilometers in Muskoka can you do in one day in your Kia Forte? Exactly. Not many. So, yeah. Okay. So then you'd mentioned earlier as well that like after teaching 6 to 7 classes a day, you went through a moment of like burnout where and that was sort of part of maybe the impetus to be like, I want to shift what I'm doing. But how do you, I guess the question I have is like, did you at that moment or maybe further down the line find something that was helpful for you to get out of the burnout? Like I personally, when I've experienced entrepreneurial burnout, because man, is it real, it's not like this one quick moment. It's not like to give a depressy day. It's like you get into this like apathy of life, and getting out of it is really hard. So I'm just curious if you found something that's worked really well for you. Yeah, if you find yourself in those moments.
It's funny you say that, just because so I used to be, when I first started my business, like someone who was like all over Instagram, really consistent social media strategy, showing up every day, all the time, doing this. When I reached that point of burnout, and this was the thing that I knew something was off, was like, I had no desire to even open Instagram. I didn't want to post a story. I didn't want to have to record reels. I didn't want to post to my feed, which like for me, I've been a creator since I was like 12 years old. I used to make YouTube videos back in 2005 when YouTube first was invented. That's like the thing that I love to do. And so as soon as I realized like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, I knew something had to be off. And so in all honesty, I let myself sit in that feeling for a few months. Like, I think it was around August that it started. And then September, October, I was just like, I felt really depressed. I was having a really hard time. And then October, end of October, beginning of November was when I made the decision that I was going to move out west. And so that was kind of the door opening to like, okay, well, what's going to be the next step, right? And so with that, I kind of knew that eventually I would have to phase out the yoga, just because I wasn't going to have the same network of people here. I wouldn't have the same space. And while I understand that there is a huge yoga community here in Vancouver, I also saw it as an opportunity to kind of step out of that. And so I really just allowed myself the time and the space, I guess, to accept the fact that it was time to move on, which I think is really important, especially when you are an entrepreneur, because when we create a business, it's almost as if we treat it like our baby or our child, right? Like we have a very strong emotional attachment to this thing that we've built. And so grieving the loss of having to let go of that thing can be really, really emotionally hard. But I think that allowing ourselves to sort of move through that emotion is what creates the space for us to be able to take on the next project. And so me embracing the fact that my yoga studio chapter was going to be ending was really the catalyst in allowing me to now step into the business owner that I am now and the projects that I'm working on now.
I like what you're saying in terms of like, because my question is like, what was the thing you did to break through? And it was like, I didn't. I just allowed it to be like, just to sit with it and allowed myself to be with it, and giving yourself that permission, I think is a really good recommendation for people.
Exactly. I don't think there is this like magic tool that we can use. Like I'm an avid fan of journaling, especially when you are going through a hard time, finding a way to express what you're feeling. But I don't think that was like the ticket that helped me solve the problem. It was really just allowing myself, like we talked about in the very beginning of this episode, the opportunity to be introspective and to just ask, okay, what's going on? Coming back to those like core values, what do I really want for my life? And is the business that I'm currently building aligned with how that vision has shifted? Because I think with the pandemic, with like other things that happened in my life in that period of time of starting my business to now, a lot changed. And so I changed as an individual. And so what I wanted back in 2018 doesn't have to be the same thing that I want now, because I'm not the same person I was 4 years ago.
It makes sense. So then when you made the decision to move out west, to move to Vancouver, do you feel like that was an element of that? It was like breaking the cycle that you were in, sort of thing? Because I think during that time you also had some other personal level changes or whatever, if I remember from your TikToks as well.
Yes.
But like I guess why, let's start simply, like why Vancouver?
Yeah. So I had actually never been out west ever, but I had always, from the time I was probably about 14 or 15, had this like inner inclination that I needed to go to BC. And as like weird as it sounds too.
Wait. You'd never been out west or to Vancouver and you're like, I'm moving there.
Yeah, I had never been, but I had always known. And I used to have like dreams from the period, again, that I was like 14 until I decided to move here, where I would like physically feel in my body this need to move to British Columbia. I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to be there, but I'm here in Ontario and, life is good. I have all these great things. And so then I ended up coming out here in October of last year to visit some friends. And I instantly was like, oh my God, I love this place. I need to move here. I was like, the weight that I had been feeling of, again, from like August until October, where I was feeling depressed, I was feeling lethargic, uninspired in my business. The moment I stepped off the airplane, it was like all of that was lifted. And I have just like, I've never been in a place where it felt like that. And so I literally cried the entire plane ride back from BC to Toronto. And that's when I knew like, okay, something is drastically needs to change here. And so here we are.
And
so
here
like,
we are.
Almost a year later.
So, I mean, I think one of the things that other entrepreneurs might think for themselves in this type of conversation is, in order to go to this next phase in your business or to move across the country, you kind of have to like, I don't know, for lack of a better way to say it, like you have to like sacrifice something else. You have to let go of something else. Was that hard? Was there like big stuff you had to let go of to go there? Or was it just organically kind of aligned time?
Definitely. And I think that, again, if we come back to this idea that like entrepreneurship is sugar-coated on the internet, a lot of that doesn't really get talked about. So when I think back to 2018, when I decided to leave my job, I was leaving the identity of, a successful young professional who had done everything right. I checked all the boxes. I went to school, I got the degree, I got the job, but the pension, all of those things. But inside I was deeply miserable. Despite that, on the outside, I was portraying a certain image of a certain sort of individual to my family, to my friends, to the people that knew me. And so now I'm quitting my job and I'm going to be working as a waitress while I start a yoga business. Like, Danielle, get your life together. What are you doing? So it's like this matter of embracing the fact that I was doing what was right for me. And so the same thing was mirrored in this latest transition. So when I decided to move out west, I actually ended my 6-year relationship. I was engaged to my previous partner. We had owned our house together. I had to get him to buy me out of the house. We ended up breaking up and I ended up moving here. And so that again was this process of letting go of something that was really important to me, but it just didn't align with that next version of myself that I was trying to create. And so the same thing, I'm leaving behind this business. Well, Danielle's so flaky, she can't even commit to anything for more than a few years before she gets bored and decides to move to the next thing, right? And so I don't know if anyone said that, but in your head, you have all of these thoughts of like what people are thinking or saying, right? And so it really just comes down to really getting in tuned with what that vision is for your life. What are the feelings you want to cultivate? What are the things you want to create? And are the decisions you're making day in and day out aligning with that? And I really just came to the conclusion that if I had stayed in Muskoka, I was going to stay in that feeling of being or feeling stuck for the foreseeable future until some sort of catastrophic event took place that shook me out of it. But I couldn't sit around and wait any longer. And I think that's partially just my own impatience, is that if something is wrong, I just need to fix it right now. But I think for other people that are listening, it's important to recognize that it's not an easy decision. I didn't just wake up one day and was like, yep, I'm going to move out west and everything's going to be, you know, sunshine and rainbows. It was a lot of hard decisions that had to be made, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of, you know, back and forth. Should I, shouldn't I? Even right up until about a month before I came out here, I remember I was on a walk with my mom and I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, am I making the right choice? Should I just stay here? Da, 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 da. And she looked at me and she said, you know what? The one thing I regret in my life is never moving out of this fucking town. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm out. So
peace.
But honestly, it's hard. Yeah. It's hard.
Dropping the wisdom bombs, the moms. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
No shit, dude. I mean, I'm sorry to hear it didn't work out with your fiance, but I suppose what you're saying, as I'm understanding it, it's like, even something as serious as that, like, you know, you have to really, because that's a huge life level commitment with someone when you're getting married. So you have to know that it's going to also let you grow into who you're supposed to be.
Exactly. And so it was kind of this conversation we had where it was like, ultimately we just wanted different things and we had different visions for like what was going to make us happy, and neither of us was willing to compromise on like trying to appease the other person. And I don't think that either of us should have had to. Like, it wouldn't be fair to him for me to be like, okay, well, we're moving, and it wasn't fair to me for him to be like, no, we're staying here. So ultimately, as sad and difficult as that transition was, it was just, in the long term, I think it was better for both of us to be able to grow as individuals, to be outside of that relationship and to do what felt right for each of us.
And there's why you have a podcast called Adulting 101.
Yeah.
Right? There's like a very all right. Well, I think that there's so much more here. One of the things that I'd love maybe to talk about is your expertise around, you know, with small business, with sort of emotional health and entrepreneurial wealth health. And like, because one of the things I really appreciate about your TikTok channel is, and your other channels as well, but that's where I nerd out on your stuff the most, is it's very practically based in terms of like, this is kind of the quote right way to do the business based on like what it is. We were making the joke when you and I talked prior to the podcast here, just that, you know, you could make the same video around should you register for taxes in Canada like 800 million times, and someone's going to comment like, but if it's a side hustle. Like,
exactly. That's like, oh, the number one. If the CRA doesn't know, I'm like, oh, dear God.
Like, you're right. That's true. But that's called illegal.
Yeah, exactly. We call that tax evasion, and have fun in prison.
Yeah. Go back to the barter system if we're doing this. I mean, okay, so then I wouldn't bring this up except that you have publicly spoken about it before, but I know not that long ago, you had sort of the family tragedy with your brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking about in the timeline that you've painted the picture for us as you're moving and everything else, like this is right in the middle of all of that as well. And beyond the fact that you're still here or whatever, but like you've also managed to be in sort of still a life change and a building phase entrepreneurially. And that's the part that I find really I guess, inspiring about the whole thing. Can you talk a little bit to that experience?
Yeah. So my brother unfortunately passed away in August of 2020. So sort of right in the midst of the pandemic, which was obviously very, losing anyone is very challenging, but losing someone in the middle of a pandemic when there's all these restrictions about who you can see and who you can't see and what you
Yeah.
can do and whatever is an absolute nightmare. 0 out of 10 would not recommend.
Wait. And I apologize for like getting too specific on this, maybe.
Mhm.
So tell me how you feel comfortable answering. But like, did he die from the pandemic? Was that
No,
it was just during the
no.
time frame?
My brother had a number of issues with addiction, and so he died as the result of complications related to that. Not an overdose for anyone listening. I live in a small town, lots of horrible rumors, and it's just been a nightmare.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that happened, and so with that obviously came a very significant period of loss and of grief, while I'm also trying to figure out like what the is happening in my business, because with the pandemic, all the closures, all of that, like very stressful times. And so I'm always the type of person that like through hardship, I try to figure out like, okay, well, where are we going to grow from here? And so I went back to school. I got a post-grad in mental health intervention. This is while I'm running my business still full time, all of this. Like sometimes I wonder if I'm like mentally okay. And so my intention was to create this like curriculum, mental health, yoga for mental health for yoga teachers, for psychotherapists that wanted to incorporate yoga into their practice and that kind of thing. But then with the anniversary of his passing was right around the time where I was experiencing that period of burnout. And it was just like, it was a lot emotionally. And I think the accumulation of the grief of his death, the chaos that was my business, it was all just like way too much for me. And I needed the opportunity to really step out of that. And I think part of the pull for me to move away from Muskoka was that was my hometown. So I had grown up there. I went away for school and then I came back. And so I think I was just so exhausted of being in this bubble where everyone knows everything and there's all of this like everyone's in each other's business. And I was like, you know what, it would be nice to live somewhere where nobody knows me. I can start over and I can have more opportunities too, because like living in Vancouver already, I've been here 3 months, and I mean the access to people and projects and opportunities that I wouldn't have had in Muskoka have just been like absolutely unbelievable. But I think that the relationship and the sort of the situation that had happened there was definitely a catalyst in me in everything that I've done since. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
I can't remember now. I was just listening to you. But I mean, first off, fuck, dude. Like, I'm so sorry to hear that. As someone who's experienced loss, and it's not the same as what you have by any means, but just, yeah, it totally makes you reevaluate everything. Like, or even like in my experience, like if there's like a reprioritization you go through, it's not like it changes you in your generalized viewpoints and beliefs, but the things in how you prioritize their importance. For me, my experience was they drastically changed very quickly.
100%. And I think about that a lot too. Anytime I like want to make a decision, I just think like, so my brother was 30 when he passed away, which is very young. And so to me, it's like, okay, how can I make the most of this life that I have, knowing that I could die tomorrow? Because he was on the trajectory of like getting better and doing better for himself. And that's what happened. Right. And so you really just never know like when it's all going to end. So I'm like, why am I sitting in a situation, in a business, in a place, like a physical location that isn't making me happy, when I don't know how much time I have left? And like, I know it's so cliche, like, oh, live every day like it's your last, but it's so true that we need to really be thinking about what are the things that I value? What do I want to create? What is the point of me sitting on this fucking spinning rock in the middle of the universe? Why am I here? And how am I going to make the most of it? So that was really like my eye-opening opportunity, I guess, to really get in tune with what those things were and to consistently be doing that sort of check-in with myself, again, with this inner dialogue of like, is this the thing that I want to be creating? And if not, why am I wasting my time?
Preach. Totally. I mean, that's why we have this show, like Amplify Your Impact. There's a bigger purpose than just making money when you're an entrepreneur. Obviously, making money is part of it, and you should make lots of it and be very accepting of the reciprocity that comes your way. But there's got to be deeper, bigger purpose. You know, business leadership's the most important leadership of our time, in my opinion. But the business only exists as the vehicle coming from the individual who has the clarity, like you're describing, to really know what they're trying to do and what they're trying to create. So, okay, let's talk a little business side with this then, because clearly the arc you've gone through from like the quintessential leave the town and go to school and come back and work at a quote good job, but then be like, I'm not happy, and leave it, and then do another job, and then like go through these really, you know, let's call them like high friction moments of breakup, move, getting rid of assets like a house, because like that's a huge part too, changing work, and then your brother passing and stuff too. In terms of pivoting in a business, how have you gone through that process of like, despite these personal things, okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is, and I mean like, by the next thing, I mean like close to home, in the next 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, the next 1, 2, 3 things that I'm going to do business wise and pivot things. Do you have a process that you have uncovered that's been helpful for that? Or how do you work through that on the, so like pivoting business side?
Yeah, I've always considered myself to be like a pretty intuitive person. So in all honesty, a lot of the ideas that I get in terms of like where I need to take my business next kind of just come to me. And then I sort of let myself sit with them. So even when I had my yoga business, I had sort of this inclination that I wanted to start, and this was pre-pandemic. I wanted to start like an online membership. And so that was kind of still like a new, fresh idea at that time, because a lot of people weren't doing that. And then the pandemic came and now everyone's an online yoga teacher, but sort of just like allowing these ideas to come and then thinking about what they would look like in practice. And so with this latest pivot, where now I'm sort of more into the small business coaching space, it started with something as simple as like, okay, well, I'm just going to offer people, you know, the opportunity to hop on a one-on-one call with me. And so I posted that I was offering that, and then people started purchasing. So then it's like, okay, well, what if people aren't in a position where they want to spend that much money, or they don't want, you know, my one-on-one support? What's the next offer that I could give them? And really just sitting down and brainstorming, like if I was someone who was just starting a business, what would be the things that I would want to know? And then turn it back over to the business side and be like, okay, so now that I know these are the things they want to know, how can I take that and turn that into something that I can offer them?
I love it. I mean, I totally resonate with everything you're saying, but I want to hear more about what you just left us off with. So if someone was starting a business today, they're like, okay, I resonate with this backstory and I want to start a business. I've always had this idea. The other side note I would say is it sounds like your approach has a lot to do with how do I offer value to people, basically.
Exactly. And you always want to make sure that you're serving people in a way that they actually need, because we can have lots of great ideas that we think are amazing, but if people don't give a shit about them, then what's the
if
point?
No one cares, then they're not going to pay you for it. Yeah,
exactly.
Isn't that the truth right there? We could spend another hour just on that. But okay, someone's starting a business today, right now, based off your experience, because I think also now that you do coaching and stuff as well, you actually, it's that old adage, you know, those who can do and those who can't teach. I think that needs an update because it's kind of bullshit. But my point would be, when you teach and coach other people on something, you also understand it in a new, deeper way, because you get to like see it outside of yourself. That's been my experience anyways. So I think you've done the whole spectrum of starting business. If someone's starting a business right today, what do they need to know? Or like, what do they need to go get? Or how, like, what's the starting point? What would you recommend?
Well, I think that like getting clear on your specific offer is the number one thing. And so I always tell people, you want to think about what are the things that you're interested in? What are the things that you have a natural skill in or could learn the skill in? And then what do people actually want to pay for? So I always use this analogy in my TikToks, but like, I really love eating pizza. I'm really good at eating pizza, but no one's going to pay me to eat the pizza. So as much as I love it and I'm good at it, it doesn't matter. So when you're thinking about a viable business idea, you got to think about, you know, the things you like, the things you can do well, and then what people actually want to spend their money on. And so I think that that's the piece a lot of people miss, is we just want to do what we love. So we're like, oh, well, I love eating pizza, so I'm just going to open a business where people can just watch me on YouTube eating pizza all day, and it's going to be great. But it's again, it's not realistic. And so that can be a hard pill to swallow sometimes, because the things that we really, really love, maybe they aren't viable business ideas, and that's okay. But I think there's always a way that we can sort of tweak things to make them a viable business idea. So I could, you know, create a pizza recipe that maybe people want to pay me for, and then all of a sudden I have a viable business idea. It's about like following that inclination, but then making sure it ticks off all three of those boxes before we decide to proceed forward. And getting specific as possible too really helps, just because a lot of the times, and I found this in my first iteration of business, was like I wanted to do everything and offer everyone every single service that I could. But no one's going to see you as an expert if you're the Danielle that is a yoga teacher, but also a meditation teacher, but also a spiritual coach, and like all of these things. It's like you need to be the one person that knows this one skill really, really well. And so honing in on that as much as you can is going to be the thing that I think projects you even further.
Yeah. What's the thing that I love that. What's the thing you're the expert at that I can come to you for sure?
Exactly. And I saw that in my own business. Like when I first started, I was offering yoga, I was offering meditation, I was offering, you know, like life coaching, that kind of stuff. And once I kind of got rid of all the other shit and just focused on, you know, I am Danielle, I am the yoga expert. This is the type of yoga that I can teach you, and this is how I'm going to teach it to you. My business grew exponentially at that point. And it was like, logically, or like in my head, I'm thinking, well, this doesn't make sense. I'm offering less things. There's going to be less people to choose from. But when you can get hyper specific, it's like anytime someone thinks of yoga now, they think of my name because they know me as the yoga person. Right. So, the power of a niche, as like much as you hear it over and over again, I'm sure in the online space, you hear it so much because it's so true. And it's so, so important when it comes to growing our business.
Right. I mean, reading between the lines of what you're saying, I would say it's also like when you niche in the way that you're describing, what you create for your potential customers is clarity. Like you're not memorable if you're not clear. And for me to do business with you, you have to be memorable. Backing up a step too, I think if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, it's like, just because you love eating pizza doesn't mean open a pizza joint. Like that's a different thing. So really getting clear on that.
Exactly. And so, and understanding realistically, like, is this something that I'm going to want to do for the long term? So a lot of the times we can get like sort of these like passing by interests where like this thing is really cool and we're really into it, but we need to ask ourselves, like, is this something that I would actually realistically see myself sustaining for the long term? And you might not know that. You might think like, when I started yoga, I thought that was going to be it. That was going to be the golden ticket. And then it turned out it wasn't. But I think that if you can go into it at least hoping or having the perspective that this is something you want to do for the long term, that's really important too.
Right. So then on a really practical sense, if I'm starting a business, I go through the process, the sort of trifecta that you're describing of like, I like this, I can do it for the long term. It's something that people find value from. It's something they want to pay for. And you identify that. Then the next step, okay, like what's the tech that I need? Or like, do I going back to some of your TikTok stuff too. It's like, do I package it as an online course? Do I register with CRA? Like, what's the next things that like have to happen if someone wants to get started?
Yeah. So figuring out your offer for sure. So we know what our offer is. We need to figure out who we're going to be selling that offer to. And that's really going to guide us into where we're going to sell it. So if I know that my target audience is, we'll say like millennial aged women, okay, well, where are the millennial aged women hanging out? Probably YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. So then maybe I should focus on creating a social media strategy that's going to grow me on those platforms, because that's where I'm going to be talking to those people. And then depending on what kind of service or product you're selling, you might need to make a website, you might not. Maybe you're just going to be like, maybe you want to do e-commerce, you got to get your Shopify store set up. Maybe it's just something as simple as like a landing page that you need that explains what your services are. That really depends business to business. But in terms of like the Canadian context, just a fun fact for everyone. If you are a sole proprietor that operates under anything other than your legal name, you are required to register in whatever province you live in. And that includes any variation. So if I opened a business called Danielle Ryan Consulting, I would have to register with the province of British Columbia. But a lot of confusion around that. And I'm happy to chat with people one-on-one if they do have questions. But I also have I have a free checklist that I give to people. So it's like the 8 steps you need to start your business, and it explains everything in detail there as well. So
yeah, I saw that. And I think I'm pretty sure I even downloaded it. Definitely go check it out. DanielleRyan.me, I think, right?
yeah, that's correct.
There we go. The website, this is a pretty granular question, but I feel like there's a lot of confusion, and you sort of highlighted why maybe that exists. Do people need a website? Like, you're starting a business. I think a lot of people nowadays think, because we're in the digital era and everything's so digitized, that like the first step is, I better build a website. Is that true? Can you just start going and not have a website? Is there anyone who shouldn't have a website? What's your thought on that?
I think that if you are like not a tech heavy person, you would be fine without a website, provided that you make like one of like the Google business pages, or like there's a lot of like free alternatives out there. Like it depends on the field of business that you're in. So like when I was in my yoga business, I had a website because I needed to rank high on Google search. So I needed, when people searched yoga in Muskoka, I needed to be the first business that popped up. And so I used my website as a tool, an SEO tool, to get myself to rank to the top. But other businesses, it might not necessarily be a necessity. Like right now, I just have that one single landing page, danielleryan.me, that has all of my contact info, and that's it. There's no other information about me on there. Maybe like 2 sentences that explain who I am, and that's it. And so if people want to get in touch with me, they can go there, and that'll give them access to everything they need. And I primarily market myself through TikTok and Instagram. So the website is more of a placeholder than anything.
Right. It's just a landing page for people to find where to click to something else. I
Exactly.
have it up right now. It's actually brilliant in its simplicity. What did you build this on? What's the platform?
It's called Cardco. So CARRD.co.
I totally built a site last night on Card.
That's
hilarious.
So good. It's so easy to use. And for, again, like anyone who is like a freelancer or anything like that, it's a great option because you're not spending hours like formatting a WordPress website. You're simply just plugging and playing their drop-in stuff, and it gets the information across to your target audience easily.
And I think it's free unless there's a pro version, but even the pro is like $20 a year. Like it's like insanely like
I think I have the free version, and then I just purchased my custom domain through Namecheap. So then that's it. Check,
done. And you're going. I mean, with these sort of business resources and the questions like, do you need a website? I think if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, it's kind of like, you just have to look at it more critically. Like there's no one size fits all. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. It's, what's your product? How are you going to sell it to people? Where are they going to go and be able to do that? You need to make that happen.
Exactly. So obviously if I have an e-commerce business, like, yes, I'm going to need a website, or I'm going to need to utilize a platform like Etsy or something where I can sell the product that I'm trying to sell to people. But I think a lot of us get hung up on like the technicalities of like, oh, I don't know how to build a website, so I can't launch my business. It's like, nah, we can figure that out later. Just get your Instagram or your TikTok or Facebook, wherever your market is hanging out, get that rolling, and then we can figure out the website later.
Start selling.
Exactly.
So then about pivoting, because one of the things that you mentioned too is, you had this vision for a specific sort of yoga niche that you were going to start working within. And then now you've pivoted to be more generalized business than yoga and content creation, especially small business, which makes sense to me. But it makes me think about where we fail as entrepreneurs. So that pivot, I'm not sure that it was because of any failure on your part, but in your entrepreneurial journey specifically, is there like a moment of failure that you really learned something from that really like impacted your future decisions?
Obviously there's been like offers that I put together that didn't sell, or like ideas I had that were kind of a flop. And I would guess you could consider those sort of like failures, but I always just look at them as like opportunities again to pivot to something else, or as an opportunity to kind of reflect on like, is this the thing I really want to be creating? So I mentioned a few years ago when I first started, I had also gotten into like the life coaching space just because I had hired a coach to sort of help me start the business. And then that didn't really go anywhere. I had a few clients that I worked with that I still am like close friends with now as a result of it, but I never really took off in the way that I had hoped. And then through that experience, I kind of came to realize that like that whole industry, there were parts of it that didn't really align with who I was and the things I wanted to create. And it just felt a little bit icky to me. And so I think that was really an eye-opening opportunity for me to take a step out of that. And so now as I'm kind of transitioning back into coaching, but in a different sense, because I'm teaching something more tangible that I actually have a lot of experience in, it's been interesting to see internally that some of those fears sort of resurfacing of like, oh, am I like the icky, sales coach that's like coaching people on how to run a coaching business or whatever? And it's like, I don't know. I think there's some very definitive lines that we need to draw for ourselves internally that come through the process of like things not working out the way we had intended.
Yeah. So, I mean, based on what you just said, then can you walk me through your process now? So you have this previous experience, a couple flops with offers or whatever. Maybe we can bring them into the conversation, but like, how did you come up with your offers? We sort of already alluded to this, but your current offers today that you use. So you've got one-on-one coaching, we've got like a free download. I'm assuming maybe there's some nurture sequence on the backside of that or whatever.
Exactly.
Like,
and then I'm working on a few like digital products right now.
Right. Okay. So there's like the trifecta again. Like we've got the free that nurtures, we've got digital product option, we've got the one-on-one coaching. Like, what's the package? What's the one-on-one coaching package? But more importantly, like, how did you come up with that this is the thing that you should offer?
Honestly, just out of listening to what the people wanted. So when I started again on TikTok, I wasn't starting it with the intention of like, I'm going to be a small business coach. I was just sharing my experience. And then I started getting a lot of these questions. So even with like the free checklist that I have, that came out of someone literally commenting on one of my TikToks saying, is there somewhere I can find a step-by-step checklist on all of the things I'm supposed to do? And I was like, wait a minute, I can create that for you. And so someone was asking like, how can I get your eyes on my business? Do you offer one-on-one consultations? Other people asking like, would you be able to sit down with me and ask and show me how to start my business? Questions like this. And I was like, okay, if the people are asking for this, there's demand there. So then I just put the offer out there, allowed it to, go out into the ether. I would send it to my email list, make a few TikToks about it. And then next thing you know, people were booking. And it was like, okay, this is a service that people want and need and are willing to pay for. And so I think there's no better market research than just like testing it out. And so if we go back to those offers that I had before, where like, I thought this was a great idea and that it was going to do so well. I think the issue there was that I wasn't listening to my audience. And so I was offering them things that they didn't even really want. I just thought they'd be a great idea. And so I think in entrepreneurship, we can get caught up in that sometimes where like, we think we know all, but ultimately we're here to serve our customers. So what do the customers want and what are they saying? And how can we listen to them and serve them in a way that is going to come back to us?
Mostly because I'm super curious now. Can you give an example of a flop offer that you're like, this is money, it's going to work. And then it just didn't
yeah. So I can think of one specifically. I had a few like one-on-one private life coaching clients. And so I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I just created this like group coaching program where it would start January 1st, 2019. We're all going to get together once a week for whatever, 8 weeks. And I'll have all of these exercises that we can work through. Not one person bought it. Not even my previous one-on-one clients. Nobody wanted a group offer. They all wanted, the opportunity to work with me one-on-one. And that just wasn't what they were looking for. But I was just like, oh, well, it's lower cost and more accessible and it's going to be great. But it's like, people don't want to talk about their problems in front of everyone else. They want to do it in a container that's safe. And so I think that was kind of the first inclination that I was like, okay, maybe I don't know best all the time. Maybe I should really start listening and asking the people what they want.
Right. But then to what you're saying, it's like the product wasn't the issue. Maybe it was the delivery method of the product. It was the offer itself.
It could be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool to hear. Okay. So now I can do one-on-one coaching with you. Is that like a program? I mean, are we like setting up a recurring meeting? Is it a one-off thing? How do you package that up?
So all of this is like very relatively new. Like I just started offering coaching about a month ago. So as of right now, it's just one-off, one-on-one coaching. We sit together for an hour, really map out a plan. And then you have access to Voxer with me for 7 days following. So Josh, if you and I were to sit down and figure out, okay, I'm starting this new business. Okay, here's what you need to implement on your social media strategy. Here are the next steps. Then I'm going to sit with you for the next 7 days and just hold you accountable to all of the things that you said you were going to do in that time period. And so then if after that you wanted to continue working with me, you could book another call or we could have a discussion about that. But where it stands right now, it's just the one-off one-on-one coaching and then this new digital offer that I'm working on.
I like that. I like the Voxer follow-up as well, to just have like the real-time conversation. But my understanding of what you're saying is it's like beyond the fact that you can customize the strategy. It's just like, just get it started, like get the foot in the door working with someone and then see what's necessary.
Exactly. Or I've had people who started a business, but didn't really have a strategy and have just kind of been sitting at a standstill. And so I'm just really helping them sort of figure out how to pivot in order to get things actually working so they can start making money.
Well, let's talk about that. If I'm beyond the startup phase, right? Like I'm open, I'm going, maybe there's some money coming in, but I'm not making money or not enough. Like it's not like quote working.
Mm-hmm.
What's the audit that I should do? If the audience was going to take some Danielle Ryan special sauce.
Yeah.
Where
Honestly,
should I look?
It's a lot of what we've already talked about. So a lot of the times, and I see this over and over again, is people not getting specific. They want to sell 20 offers because they think that if they have so many options that everyone is going to choose, there'll be something for everyone. But my thing that I want people to recognize is like the more specific you get, the more clearly you can solve someone's problem and speak to them directly, and the more likely they are to purchase from you. So if I think of like, again, going back to the yoga thing, if my service is one-on-one private yoga where I am going to sit down with you and teach you, how to feel in your body, how to move through your body, the people who are too afraid to go to a public yoga class are going to be the people that are going to come to me. I'm not going to get Brenda who goes to, I was going to say Soul Cycle but that's the cycling class. But like goes to hot yoga every Friday because she loves, to be in the group atmosphere. She's not going to be interested in me, and that's okay, because I'm going to get, Sally Smith over here who's too self-conscious to do that and really just wants someone to work with her one-on-one. And so if I can get really specific in who it is I serve and then figure out my marketing, a lot of the times what I see is like, I'll sit down with someone and I'm like, okay, I went through your Instagram before we got on this call and I have no idea what it is you have to offer me. A lot of the times it's something as simple as like crafting a single sentence in your bio that says, I do X that helps people solve problem Y, and here's how I do it. And so that when I find you on the internet, because there's so many profiles, I'll know exactly, like when I come across Josh's Instagram, oh, that's exactly my problem. He has exactly my solution. I'm going to go to him. Right. And so you need to get specific in what your solution is so that you can craft a message that also echoes that simple solution.
I love that. It makes me think of, and I don't know where this originates in the entrepreneurial business help world, but the idea of like one person, one offer, one message or whatever, like that little triple piece. Just
one
like
person,
really
one problem, one solution. That's what I always tell people. Yeah.
Totally. We've mentioned social media a few times. I feel like throughout the years, I work a lot in the yoga world or in the wellness world. And there's a lot of sort of like, although it's prevalent in social media land, there's also a lot of like pushback of not liking it and conversation on how that's healthy and does it align therefore ethically with our clients and et cetera. But from a marketing perspective on the entrepreneurial side, from a small business perspective, right now, if you're starting out, is that where people should go to do their marketing? Instagram? I mean, what about Facebook? Obviously, TikTok is something that you found success in. Would you say to someone starting up a pizza shop, we used earlier as the example, like you need to open a TikTok account?
Again, I think it depends on who your target market is and where you're hanging out. And I said this in a TikTok video and got so much flack for it, but I'm like, if I was personally opening a business that was targeting middle-aged women, I wouldn't go to TikTok as my primary platform. I would be on Facebook because that's where those people are hanging out. And then they're all going to come for me and say, we're on TikTok too. And it's like, okay, I get it. But I want to think about where's the majority of people that I'm trying to speak to, focus my attention there. And then sure, you could still have a TikTok channel and an Instagram account and all of this, but you really want to focus on where those people are. Because if I'm posting, you know, all of my small business content on Facebook, which is just my friends and family, is that really going to help me gain traction? No, it's not. I need to go to TikTok where those people are hanging out looking for those answers, right? So really knowing your audience and knowing their behaviors, I think is big. But I honestly think we live in an age where without social media, it is really hard to grow that business unless you are someone that's doing like in-person markets and stuff. But even still, if I meet a crafter at a market, chances are I'm going to follow them on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, because I want to keep up to date with what they're doing, right? And social media really affords us this opportunity to kind of get into the behind the scenes of what it's like to run a business, which I think is half the brand itself.
So then from a brand standpoint, I totally resonate with what you're saying. And like, even if that's not the discovery moment, that's the connection moment. It's how I'm going to stay connected to you over the long run.
Exactly.
Sort of
community building.
Right. It's sort of community centric. Yeah. So then like with your TikTok, I was looking at it earlier today to remind myself of like your top videos. Your top one is on passive income. And then, you know, in your top is a little bit like just you talking about moving across the country, like just mentioning that as well. So those are like kind of drastically different TikToks. Have you found with any platform a strategy for small business that you think kind of works, kind of nails it? Like if you were coaching someone on it, what would you talk about when we start talking about strategy for a channel like TikTok, if you had discerned that that's the place you should be?
Yeah. So I think with TikTok, there is this sort of level of authenticity that people are looking for. And so if I'm just sitting in every video here at my computer with my beautiful headphones on, being like, today we're going to talk about the 6 steps to starting your business. Step 1, da, 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 da. People want that content, but they don't want that content every day. They want that content, but then they also want to know, you know, like the goofy stuff. So a lot of the times you'll see me, oh my God. Okay. I was on CBC last week. They interviewed me to talk about the new like FCC regulations with TikTok. And they cut this clip from one of my TikToks where I'm literally dancing around, flailing my arms like this, doing, and again, it's like the 6 steps to starting your business, but it's like to some silly song. So I'm just being a complete goof, but the text on the screen is showing like actual practical information that people want to hear. But I was just like, why did you choose the most ridiculous?
That one?
Exactly. There's 700 videos and that's the one you picked. But I think that really just shows the point of like, people want to feel like you're, you know, just comfortable, someone that they could hang out with while they can also still gain value from you. So I think that TikTok really adds this sort of level of authenticity that we don't see on a lot of the other more carefully curated apps like Instagram.
Man, you're making me have a little introspective moment, because as you're like this sitting there, today we're talking about, that's my TikTok channel right now, dude. Like I'm gonna have to hire you.
Gotta mix it up, man.
I mean, you wouldn't know because I live in Latin America, but dancing is not my first choice.
It's not mine either.
I know. It's like totally not the only thing the app's about, but I like what you're saying, because you're right. Authenticity has almost become this cliche catchphrase that people chuck around, but authenticity is important. I want to know not just what you can do for me, but I want to know who you are. Like, who am I doing business with? We don't have to
I want to feel like we're on the same level. You know, a lot of the times I think with the internet, especially in like the age of Instagram, say like 5 years ago, everyone was so like carefully polished, right? And so now I'll literally sit on my bed and be like, okay, let's talk about tax laws in Canada. And that video will go viral. And I haven't put on any makeup and I'm in my pajamas, just in my bed. But it's like, people want to feel like, you know, we're just hanging out, we're equals. We're just people having a good time and I'm learning something along the way. And so I think that there's a place for both styles of video, definitely like the more formal sort of sit down calculated ones, as well as just like off the cuff.
Yeah. It's like be the content rather than curate the content a little
exactly.
bit. Oh, I like this. You're inspiring me. I want to go make a bunch of TikToks now after this. Yeah, well, I mean, to what you're saying too, I need to align with you in some way, I think is a really important detail, because I'm just thinking for myself, like there are some people on TikTok even that like I would never fucking do business with. And people I've experienced in my entrepreneurial journey as well, that because of who they are, like it would have to be that they are the only person that can help me with something before I would ever go to them, which is unlikely in this day and age. So the reverse is also true, that
Exactly. But again, that comes down to knowing and understanding your audience, because the people that you're watching that you're like, fuck that, I don't want anything to do with them, they probably have a loyal following of people that are like, oh my God, this person's amazing, they know everything. And so that's just like really crafting your message in a way that speaks to the people that you want to work with is so important.
Man, truth. I think what's your experience being like, because all of the services that you've offered, from like driving around to then the type of specific angle of yoga, but then especially when we start getting into the social media realm of things, you really have been quite, I guess, courageous, brave, and like putting yourself out there in that way. Because I mean, that's part of the polished element, is you get to hide behind this caricature of yourself. What you're saying is it's better traction to mix in like the raw, real, authentic part of it. But what would you maybe say to someone who says, okay, I get what you're saying, but like deep down, if they were really to admit it to themselves, they're actually scared of doing that because they have to show what's real.
Yeah. And so I think there's also sort of this like happy medium too, that you have to find of like, I don't air all of my dirty laundry on the internet. And I think that there's definitely people I know in my life that share literally everything on their Instagram. And I'm just like, what are you doing? I'm embarrassed for you.
Right.
But so like finding sort of this happy medium of like, okay, I am a brand, I am a business, but then in order to create that level of connection and community, I do need to let people into sort of what's going on in my life. So finding or defining, I guess, those boundaries of like, what am I comfortable sharing online and what do I want to keep private, and sort of allowing yourself to sit in that question. And then understanding also, I think one important piece to remember is that like, if I post something on my Instagram story and you see it, you're also swiping to the next 5 people. So in 2 minutes, you're going to forget even what it was that you saw. And so no one is obsessing over us as much as we obsess over ourselves. So we think that like everyone's eyes are on us and they're going to notice when we make this big drastic change in our life, but no one really gives a shit at the end of the day. Like, sure, they might want what's good for you, but they're not sitting there being like, okay, what's Danielle up to today? Like, let me check here on my phone and like carefully watch every single thing that she posts. Like, sure, you might have those loyal followers, a handful of them that do follow you religiously, but for the most part, like I don't have a single account that I go and check every single day to see what they've posted. But if they pop up on my feed, I'll be like, oh, that's cool, whatever. So I think that we tend to live sort of like in this bubble where we think everyone's eyes are on us, but that's really just not the reality. And so just remembering that sometimes is enough to allow us to show up online.
Dude, it's so true. Like our own egos blow us up so much and we think that we have to be worried about it. But you're right. I can't think of a single person. Like I love when you end up in my feed and I might go check out your profile or something, but I've not once been like, I'm going to go on and check out what Danielle Ryan. You're right.
And watch every single video till the last one that I saw.
Yeah, not a single time, not with nobody. Like there's no one that's like that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I love it. Wow. Okay. So then sort of bringing it back to this idea of pivoting, and with what the title of the show ultimately will be, this specific episode too, keeping your shit together, like especially when you get a curveball. You've gone through that experience. So Danielle, today, what do you have, like a routine that you follow that helps you with like just general entrepreneurial coping? You've experienced burnout. Like what's your preventative care as an entrepreneur now? Are you like part of the 5M club and you meditate every morning? You mentioned journaling, or like, I'm just curious what you find works for you.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely like I try to journal as much as I can, even if it's just as simple as like writing out what my to-do list for the week is. Really finding a way to get the ideas out of my head onto, I actually put this away before the interview. I should have left it out. I have this massive whiteboard. It was an accident. I meant to buy one like this big. And when it came here from Amazon, it was like the size of my wall. But it's great. So I can map out like any ideas that I have. Again, like as an intuitive person, I often get hit with like, oh, you should create this offer and create this offer. So simply just like having a list where I can write those things down so that, like, for example, yesterday I had some free time in the morning where I had about 4 hours that I was like, maybe now is a good time to work on like one of these back burner projects that I've been like sitting on and haven't taken action on. And so then having that list allows me to kind of check those things off. But I think in terms of like day to day, really, like for me, I don't know if you can see him right now, but my dog is like passed out on the couch. And so like with him and I will go for a walk, a nice long walk every morning, really just to get centered, or I'll usually go to the gym and then take him for a walk. And that really helps me to really get grounded and centered in like, okay, I feel like energized and ready to take on the day. And then I usually try to end the night by like reading a few chapters of a book, whether it's personal development or just like fiction, something to really wind down. And those sort of two things tend to be the anchors in my day. But from a day-to-day perspective, it's mostly just like having a clear list of like, these are the priorities that I need to get done, and then figuring out where I'm going to fit them into my schedule.
So schedule, organization, and then I like that analogy of like the two anchor things, even if it's small, even if it's just for a minute.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I remember being in a course at one point, and the psychologist who was running the course was making the suggestion that for you to actually succeed at anything in life, you have to create a routine. It's like a necessity of humanity. Now, the routine's level of detail varies person to person, but it's kind of what you're describing. It's just making me think of that again. That's really cool.
Yeah, because I think there was a point in time when I first started my business, because I really struggled with like knowing what to do with my time, where I would block out every single hour of the day from the time that I woke up to the time that I went to sleep. Like, okay, I'm going to walk here, and then I'm going to drink my coffee, and then I'm going to do my journaling, and then I'm going to blah, 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 blah. But I think if there's too much rigidity, that is also, it can be problematic. So allowing yourself sort of the flexibility to kind of follow what feels good while still recognizing that there is like stuff that needs to get done. I think for me anyways, that's what's worked, is knowing what my priorities are, but then allowing myself to kind of fill them in as I have the time or the desire to do them.
Right. The space for you to just chase the dopamine a little bit.
Exactly.
Follow the inspiration as well. That makes sense to me. Actually, it's funny because I have an executive assistant who's usually the tech support, Kay's our tech support today, on the podcast here. And she handles my schedule for the most part. And so she does an excellent job. But very often at the end of the week, we'll check in and she's like, well, did this happen? I scheduled this time for you. And I'm like, no, I got to that time and then I did this other thing because I like not even like got distracted. I did something positive in the business. It just, I was not inspired to do the thing that was on the calendar. So
exactly.
Yeah. I totally resonate with that. You know, it sounds to me, if I'm like, with everything I'm hearing from you, that you're not really into the idea of like the hustle culture, you know, like get up early and grind and just work extra hours to get ahead because blah, blah, blah. Like that seems like the antithesis of your approach.
I think I did that for a few years. And then I just kind of realized like, I don't think this is going to work for me in the long term. And so mind you, I still get up at 6 a.m. every day and like get my day started. And I'm, you know, usually sitting at my desk by 8, but it's just like, again, if I hold myself to this concept that like, I need to always be working, I think I just fear that I'm going to end up in a position that I was in, you know, 6 to 8 months ago, where I was really burnt out and unsatisfied. And so for me, it's not so much of like, I can only work from 8 till 4. If I'm inspired on a Friday night at 7 p.m. to script and record a video, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. But just kind of allowing myself to follow this cycle of what needs to get done and what feels good, and just doing it when that time comes is definitely more my approach now, versus like, I'm putting in 14 hours a day and we're just going to grind this out. And so I think there are definitely benefits to that. And you could see greater success if you had sort of that hustle mentality. I just think, again, for me, life is much more about sort of enjoying the experience, enjoying the journey. And that just doesn't sound fun to me, quite frankly. So why would I bother wasting my time?
Right, right. Well, this next question, sort of off the back of that, we've sort of like half answered it, and then part of the question won't make sense based off what you just said. But I'm always curious because I've been surprised, honestly. You know, my journey from being like just a yoga teacher working in a cleaning business to then managing and building and owning a studio and selling and then coaching. But especially in the last, let's say like 6 to 8 years, where I've been really by myself in my work because my team is decentralized and we're working with people all over the world. I've been surprised then as I join other entrepreneurial communities, how commonplace sort of performance enhancing techniques are. Like it's like a really, but it's to battle what we're talking about. It's like to be able to uphold this level of hustle. So I don't know. Do you use any performance enhancing techniques? I know you said journaling, maybe meditation if I'm interpreting, yoga. You said you go to the gym, walk, but like, is there anything for you personally that you find helps you perform as an entrepreneur?
Honestly, I don't really know. I think that journaling is great. Again, I'm a huge fan of like brain dumping my to-do list and kind of prioritizing from there. But I don't have any like, I wake up at 5 a.m. and then I drink my water and like, I don't have any like secret techniques. I'm just a gal figuring it out. So half the time I have YouTube on while I'm just like doing my design work or whatever, like trying to make it as enjoyable as possible. And I guess like maybe that's my performance enhancing technique is like, how can I make this experience the most enjoyable as possible so that I'm not just like hunched over at my desk all day.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to look different for everyone.
No, but I think that's a great one because if you're engaged, if you're having fun and you're engaged with what you're doing, then everything else feels easier as well. So
exactly,
that is your performance enhancing technique, I would say. Okay, final couple of questions here as we sort of wind it down a little bit, and then I want to hear from you how maybe the audience can talk with you more or sort of learn more about what you do. But you mentioned earlier in your move to Vancouver how opportunities opened up versus your previous environment, and it just made me think of this idea that like to some element, your environment does change who you are, but also from an entrepreneurial standpoint, who you're around and how they work up levels you as well, potentially. Like, what's the saying? You're the accumulation of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly.
Which is a side note to me personally is always tricky. And I know Kay resonates with this because I have 3 kids at home. So I'm like, well, 4 out of the 5 are like, someone who doesn't care about my business, my wife, like she cares, but like she's not inspired by the type of business that I do. And then the kids who we're mostly talking about poop jokes right now at their age. So I need like one other good person to talk to every day. But I digress. The environment moving, it's also like relationships. In your entrepreneurial journey, have you found any relationships or communities or something around that thought that has been really helpful or impactful for you to succeed?
Yeah, I definitely think even just having other friends who are in the entrepreneurship space has been really helpful. When I was living in Muskoka, I had actually met one of my close friends there was a coffee shop that I used to rent an apartment before I bought my house that was like right above a coffee shop. And so I would be at this coffee shop like every other day of the week. And so there was this other guy there who was also there like every day of the week. And so then one day we just sat down next to each other and he turned to me and he was like, "What do you do? Like, I see you here all the time." And we started chatting and it turned out we were both sort of doing our own versions of entrepreneurship. And through that, we were able to foster like a very excellent friendship. And it was nice to just be able to have that person to, bounce ideas off of or talk about, growth opportunities and things that we were working on. And so then moving here, I had moved here with the intention that like I would be able to grow a bigger network and have opportunities. And sure enough, shortly after I moved here, I got connected with a bunch of other TikTok creators who are based in Vancouver. And so we've met up a few times and we've collabed on like some silly content ideas. But then it's also nice to be able to have those conversations with people. So a lot of the times in the creator space, like I do a lot of brand deals as well, like paid sponsorships and stuff with companies. And when you're first getting into that, a lot of it's just like guesswork. Like you don't know how much you should charge or what's fair and what to include in the contract and da 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 da. Well, next thing you know, I'm having conversations with these individuals and they're telling me all of these facts and information that I didn't even know. Like, oh, I didn't know I should be asking for that, or I didn't know I should be doing this. But it really just comes down to the exposure to those people and those opportunities. And I have nothing against the town that I was living in. It's just like so small and so isolated from the rest of the world that there's not really as many opportunities as there are here to make those connections and be around those people and have those conversations.
Right. I mean, I grew up in a small town too. It's a little bit like just the exposure to people in the same genre of life. I don't know, for lack of a better description.
Exactly. Like a lot of those people have the perception that like life is, get a degree or don't, get a stable job and work that for the rest of your life. And that's okay. If that's what makes you happy and you love your job and you want to keep doing that, right, all for it. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to grow, it's really hard to expand your mindset when all the people around you only know what they know. And so I think that having the opportunity to network and to build those connections are going to be the thing that can help to take you to the next level.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And I think just maybe the environment is how you end up curating those relationships. So it's looking at it more that way, that you got to go to where the similar people are, maybe is the.
Exactly. I always just think like, The Little Mermaid. I want to be where the people are. I sing that to myself all the time.
So do I. I've watched it many times with my stars. 100%. I just wish I had legs. Yeah. My daughter wishes she was a mermaid. So same difference in reverse.
Perfect.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess sort of to finalize this, we talked a lot about pivoting today. We talked a lot about sort of keeping your shit together, mental health stuff. We talked like, present you talking to past you at that moment in time. But if you had to like give one pinnacle piece of advice that's been from all of your cumulative experience to someone who's listening and they're like, I'm going to start a business or I need to improve my business, what would that thing be?
Yeah, just again, get really clear on what it is you want and go for it without hesitation. So mind the naysayers, forget what they have to say. No one who's doing better than you is ever going to comment on where you're at in your journey. So just being mindful of that and remembering what it is you're trying to create, holding on to that vision and working towards it step by step every day. Like nothing's going to happen overnight and that's okay. We just got to stay consistent and trust that it's all going to work out eventually.
Heck yes. I love it. What did we not talk about? What did we miss that you're like, did we miss anything major that you're like, we got to tell people?
I don't think so. I think that we had like a pretty well-rounded conversation.
We covered a lot of ground,
stuff.
Dude.
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty good about this.
So if people want to get in touch with you, I know that we've already plugged it a little bit during the show. How do people get in touch with you? Where would you want them to go to find you if they want to communicate or if they just want to come on your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So easiest way is, again, just go to danielleryan.me. But if you'd rather just open an app, TikTok, Instagram, my handles, it's Danielle Ryan. You can find me there. Easiest way to get in touch with me, just shoot me a DM if you have any questions, comment on one of my videos. I might not answer you right away, but I'll get to it eventually.
And she does, because that's how I got in touch with Danielle. Actually, despite knowing your website, I was like, I'm going to send this direct message. So
yeah,
I really appreciate you coming on and spending all this time with us, Danielle. I think I appreciate your candor and just sharing the depth of your story and everything. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, just hearing from other people out there that even if they don't have the same story, that they can relate to it, just the realness of it. I really appreciate that, because I think it's valuable for us as entrepreneurs, especially those of us who are really purpose, passion built, trying to create positive impact in the world. Like, we need to know that you're not alone. It's not always just the hyper successful Lambos situation that we see out there. So thank you so much for coming and talking today. Those of you watching the show, or listening to the show after the fact, make sure, first off, hit subscribe because you need to keep getting more episodes like this. Go check out Danielle's stuff. And if you're somewhere that you can post a comment or a question, you're welcome to do it below the show. We will respond to every single one as well as we go. But that's it for today. Danielle, thanks so much. Kay, thanks for
having me.
Running the backside for us. And we'll talk to you soon. Peace.